All right, I imagine everyone can see this. Yeah, my name is Grant. I'm a building envelope engineer and a bit of a high performance building guru, building science guru. So this one is on the myth of does a building need to breathe, and that is pretty common to hear. Oh, you're building too tight. The building needs to breathe. You know, it affects the health of the indoor occupants and of the building itself. So let's get through it. So just quickly going through the outline here, the purpose of this quick presentation to differentiate the needs of that topic of building needs to breathe based on both looking at it from the occupant perspective and the building itself perspective. When we look at the building, we're looking kind of thinking more on the moisture management, the water, air and vapor control of the building walls. Explore the indoor and outdoor pollutants that affects the occupants, and kind of take a review of where the older buildings, the old uninsulated buildings, were they any better because they breathed? Were they better for everyone and for the building? So at the end of it, hopefully we have a bit of an open conversation to design and build better based on what I review here, and better understand indoor air quality and energy loss through the building envelope. Okay, so building needs to breathe. Two parts of it. I'm going to break it up into the building side of things, the building envelope, the health of the building itself, and then the occupants, the health of the people that use the buildings. So looking at from the building side of things, so do buildings need to breathe? Why? Why do people say that? So I think the biggest reason is the thought of moisture management. Buildings get wet, building materials get wet through seasons, rain events, groundwater. They need to dry. So it's okay for most building materials to get wet as long as they readily can dry. We also have interior moisture sources from people, their breathing, showering, cooking, their activities, drying your clothes, and plants as well. So I've heard of this before, and this saying is kind of the most durable building is actually one that has no occupants, because occupants provide a lot of moisture load to buildings. As long as that building, this is true as long as that building is actually still heated, even though no one's in it. If it's not heated, then there could be issues because you don't have that waste heat to dry out the walls. Okay, so if we look at it from the perspective of the four principal control layers of a building assembly, which are water, air, vapor, and thermal. Water is more important than air is more important than thermal, or air is more important than vapor, and vapor is more important than thermal. So it's in the order of importance there. And you can see kind of water is rainwater, groundwater. That is the most important. That destroys buildings. It results in mold. And the least important, thermal, the insulation of a building assembly, is kind of the one that the codes has the most to say about. And kind of when we talk about high performance buildings, is kind of what's referred to as an important metric. What's your R value of your wall assemblies? Oh, okay, it's high, so it must be a good building, but not necessarily, because that's the lowest ranked of importance. All these four principal control layers have one common thing in common, and that is heat and water, and specifically latent heat, which is when heat is released or absorbed in the change of a phase between a solid, liquid, and gas. So vapor is water that has evaporated, and so it's water vapor. Water is still in that form. For water to evaporate, heat needs to be added to the system, and heat flow is prevented through thermal insulation through the walls. And then air itself carries a lot of moisture. So air carries a lot more moisture than vapor diffusion through a building assembly. All energy is heat or on its way to becoming heat. Okay, so we look at these four principal control layers. We'll look at water and thermal here. So water, so buildings need to dry. Buildings naturally get wet when it rains. Water can get in. We protect against water from penetrating your building, but it can still come in through construction defects or failed sealants, deteriorated materials, etc. It naturally comes into a building, it needs to dry. So we need latent heat for that to happen, for that energy change from a liquid water to a vapor to water vapor. It happens from the inside using that energy comes from the inside using waste heat. So when you're heating a building, there's energy flow from the inside of the building through your walls, and that helps dissipate that water and dry that assembly. You add more insulation, that reduces it. And from the outside, we have a good energy source, the sun. Rain screens are really important to aid drying, in drying from the outside and from the inside. Moisture flow from the inside through the assembly. If it can adequately move through and not condense, then it can also dry. Thermal control. So thermal reduces that drying potential because it slows the heat flow. So it slows energy. So the more we insulate buildings, the less waste heat, latent heat can get to the building assembly and dry. So with that in mind, for the people that say buildings need to breathe in order for the building to last a long time, well, it could be said then, therefore, the buildings need to be uninsulated, which is unpractical from a comfort perspective of the occupants. And that's the primary importance of a building is for shelter and protection and comfort. Looking at vapor control. So climate specific vapor profiles are very important. Depending what your climate is, where you're located, we want that building, we want to protect against moisture moving through your building and condensing in the winter time, because the warm, humid air on the inside of a building will move through that assembly, that wall assembly, and condense. So you want to prevent against that using vapor retarders, but using ones that are appropriate for your climate and application. So a swimming pool requires a different type of vapor barrier, vapor retarder than, say, a single family house. So our code mandates for Part 9 single family house to be no greater than 1 perm, which is considered a Class 2 vapor retarder. So vapor retarders prevent wetting and interstitial condensation, which is great. But they also prevent drying in both directions. So we want to promote drying in the correct direction. So, and that's only true for one of the seasons. So when we pretty much guard against at winter time, when we have our vapor barrier on the warm side of the wall, and but then in the summertime, our vapor retarder or vapor barrier is actually on the incorrect side, because we are hot outside, and in an air conditioning building, it's cool inside. And so it's a little bit reversed. So we want to guard against that and provide vapor barriers that are correct for the climate and use of the building to maximize drawing of the assembly, because vapor barriers prevent drying in the direction of the vapor barrier, vapor retarder. And the last one is air control. So air transports heat and water vapor, and water holds a lot more energy and a lot more heat than air, 4 times as much by weight and 1,000 or 3,000 times by volume. So there's far more moisture moved through air movement than vapor diffusion. So air control is much more important, and that's why air control is much more important than vapor control on that hierarchy list. In an example here is this figure. So a sheet of drywall, and the top is vapor diffusion movement, pushing through a third of a quart of water, and the bottom is the same area, but with instead of vapor diffusion, it's a hole, a 1-inch hole, with a pressure differential of 5 Pascal, which can be a regular amount of pressure difference that you could expect to see. And that 1-inch hole could be the free area of a electrical receptacle. And so you can see 30 quarts compared to a third of a quart. So it's 100 times greater of moisture movement through air leakage than it is vapor diffusion. Summertime, we have high relative humidity, and in wintertime, we have low relative humidity. So if we don't protect against air movement and provide good continuous air control, we will have a lot of moist air coming into the building in summer and a lot of dry air exchange. And we want to guard against that for occupant comfort and also building durability. So with that in mind, from the perspective of buildings, they shouldn't breathe. Okay? Buildings shouldn't breathe. They should be airtight and vapor permeable in the right direction with the right membranes. So now for the other part, looking at the occupant part of the statement of buildings need to breathe. We as occupants need good air quality. We need to not have pollutants in the air. And so what type of pollutants we have? We have CO2, which is carbon dioxide. It's a really good metric of people's exhaust air. So, and it's directly related to occupants. So 11 by 13 size office room had atmospheric carbon dioxide increase from 500 parts per million to 1,000 within 45 minutes of ventilation cessation and closure of windows and doors. That causes and affects cognitive ability. So CO2 levels over 1,000 parts per million, a study had found that they were linked to higher complaints of headaches, fatigue, and eye and throat irritation. And another one showed that poor or no ventilation in a bedroom with closed doors routinely exceeded 2,500 parts per million and caused significant, it can be a significant in the sleep and next day performance can be significantly improved by increasing the clean outdoor air supply rate in the bedrooms, was what a study found. So it's incredibly important. Carbon monoxide, CO, caused by incomplete combustion. It's odorless and can cause death. The sources are combustion appliances, so gas furnaces, gas water heaters, fireplaces, etc. All electric buildings that also don't have a fireplace are unaffected by carbon monoxide. So it's kind of a reason, one of the reasons why going all electric is can be healthy also for the indoor air, indoor air and affect the occupants. Another one is volatile organic compounds. So it's that new car smell, scented candles have it, perfumes. Those aren't necessarily good, healthy smells for you. They might smell good, but not necessarily, and more than likely they are not good. VOCs also includes formaldehydes and other known cancer-causing toxins. And caused by off-gassing building materials. A lot of engineered wood products have formaldehydes in the glues. Insulation products are manufactured with their binder with formaldehydes. A lot of them claim or indicate that the formaldehydes are pretty much off-gassed after the production of the insulation product, but it's still there as part of it, and remnants still might be within that material. And another one is refrigerants. Radon is really important for it's for indoor air quality. It's a isotope. It's released from soil and rock. It comes from the ground. So it's the #1 cause of lung cancer in non-smokers, and the second number and the #2 cause in smokers. It's odorless. It takes the path of least resistance to the ground surface. So leaky basements, air leaky basements, are an easy path for radon to enter your building. Radon levels are typically the highest in wintertime because ground cover provides a barrier. And so the path of least resistance is typically through building basements. And that same goes from days of high rainfall. It kind of blankets that and provides an impermeable layer where radon levels can increase. So it's important to monitor or to measure radon levels in buildings, and if they are high, to provide mitigation against them. Particulate matter, so commonly referred to as PM 2.5. There's also PM 10 and PM 1. 2.5 is kind of the most common. It's known as fine particles, very small, smaller than human hair, and small enough to enter your bloodstream. There is no known safe amount of PM 2.5 that would be healthy or acceptable for us to breathe. So we want as little of it as possible. And the sources come from daily routine things like cooking and combustion appliances, outdoor forest fire smoke, etc. Humidity control. This is important. I touched up on this about moisture sensitive materials and hardwoods in buildings. You don't want to have low humidity. You don't want to have high humidity. It also affects comfort and health of occupants. So there's a bit of an optimum comfort zone. So ASHRAE recommends for the best performance of the building envelope and occupant indoor air quality, IAQ, of approximately 35% in the wintertime. That's based in climate zone like Chicago. We're a little bit colder. An RH of 35 for our housing stock wouldn't perform very good. We would have a higher risk of interstitial condensation, which is condensation occurring inside your wall assembly from the warm, moist air traveling through and condensing. So we're a little bit, 35% is a little bit high, except for the really high performance homes or buildings that have good air tightness and vapor control. So to guard against this, ERVs, which are energy recovery ventilation systems, to provide that fresh air. It also not only recovers heat, but it recovers some moisture. So that can reduce the moisture load in summer, and also buffer it in winter, so it's not too drastically dry. Okay, so how do we get good indoor air quality? Fresh air ventilation is the most obvious, and through operable windows, is a little bit difficult because they're not reliable and they also need input from people to open them and to close them. Nighttime cooling, it can be cool at nighttime, but if you forget to close them, then in the daytime, it can get hot again in the summer. It can be an issue, and it's not reliable. So mechanical ventilation is the best type of system. There is ERVs, which can provide that ventilation system, controlled and balanced. So you have the same amount of incoming air than you do exhaust air. It's important to know that outdoor air is not necessarily fresh, and so it needs to be filtered. There's pollens, pollutants, smoke, etc. The outside air is dirty, and so it needs to be filtered. And so that's an important aspect from operable windows, because operable windows can't be filtered. So mechanical ventilation wins there too, because you can put a ventilation or a filter with that, and all mechanical ventilation systems routinely come with filter. So what type of filter typically is recommended is a MERV 11. MERV stands for the minimum efficiency reporting value. The higher the number, the better. Around MERV 13 is close to HEPA, kind of on the same lines of HEPA. You might hear that reference. And then to control odors and wildfire smoke, where charcoal filters can be included with that, and that can help and deter against those. Now to ERVs and HRVs, the importance of them. So these are done rather than supply only or extract only ventilation systems. The older type of buildings, typically in our climate, in our area in Winnipeg, typically had exhaust only systems. So that would be a your kitchen exhaust coupled with your bathroom exhaust fans. So they're set on timers or whatever. So when you're taking a shower or whatever, you can turn on your exhaust fan and that turns on. So it's actively pulling air out, but that air needs to be replaced. So it's all seeping in at different locations throughout your building. ERVs are good because ERVs and HRVs are good because they provide controlled and balanced ventilation and filtered. They also reduce the energy penalty, which can be quite high. So in our climate zone, we're looking about 10,000 BTUs per square foot per year, which equates to about the energy penalty of the ventilation alone greater than 200% of the passive house heating limit metric. It's quite substantial. And in terms of dollars, what that relates to is approximately about $600 per year for a typical 2,000 square foot house with that's heated electrically at 10 cents a kilowatt hour. This screenshot here I took from my own personal ERV system that I have in my house, and I've had it for 3 winters anyways. So it records the amount of heating that I've avoided through recovery of energy. And so you can see I've saved 16,000 kilowatt hours. So at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, I've saved $1,600 over 3 years. So over 3 winters. So it's very close to that $600 per year savings. Now, it's important to note that when you're using an ERV or HRV, your ventilation rate is typically greater than if you don't have a controlled and balanced ventilation system. If you're only using extract, then the amount of ventilation you're getting is a lot less. But that means your air quality is also reducing. So ERVs, HRVs are worth it. How else do we get good indoor air quality? So a continuous and robust air barrier is really important. So continuous everywhere, all the way from the foundation to the roof and through all penetrations, penetrations through your walls, windows, doors, etc. is important. That improves the delivery of the filtered fresh air and removing the stale air. It averts infiltration of pollen and smoke, especially wildfire smoke is becoming a lot more predominant these past summers, and it's forecasted to not get any better. So an improved and continuous air barrier is really important for that and preventing those pollutants from coming inside. From radon infiltrates through the ground. And as I said before, it takes the path of least resistance. So if you have a very air leaky building, that makes it a very easy target for it to come in through something called stack effect, buoyancy of air. Comfort, it affects comfort, energy efficiency, quietness, and fire resilience. John Straub, which is a building scientist and professor at the University of Waterloo, said in one of his articles, 1/3 of the energy probably leaks through the holes in your house. We are at a colder climate than where he is, so we're likely it's more around it's at least a half, if not more, depending on how efficient your building is. But it's a lot. Air leakage is a lot. And lastly, source control. So with ventilation systems, supplying fresh air, filtered fresh air, outdoor fresh air to bedrooms and living areas, and extracting through kitchens and bathrooms. Methodology has kind of changed in the high performance world. From extracting from the kitchen hood or from the kitchen itself and having a recirc hood over your cooktop. Now the methodology is to actually provide direct exhaust for your kitchen exhaust fan. But with a balanced ventilation system, there would still be an extract zone somewhere in your kitchen, just a little bit away from where you're actually cooking, so those greases don't clog your filtration system. Source of control also includes an active radon control system where required when it's tested, and this is important too from building to building. It's not necessarily if your neighbor has high radon or low radon that you'll be the same. Every building is different. Soil conditions are different. And the building shapes and air control barriers are all different. Removing VOC, volatile organic compound emitting materials, are important. So synthetic carpets, using low VOC paints, low or no VOC paints, manufactured wood products, chipboards. I mean, it's always going to be there, like your IKEA furniture, but to be cognizant that there's a risk associated with these products. Is there low VOC particle board and glues? Possibly yes, but most of them, they all have formaldehydes and other bad VOCs associated with them. And properly store cleaning chemicals, paints, attached garages, not to have gasoline containers in your attached garages, because those are still coupled indirectly, but coupled to your building, to your house. Have those in your garages, etc. Okay, and lastly, so past buildings, what has changed? Were they any better? So ventilation with them, it was provided naturally. through the air leaky envelopes and operable windows, including the commercial buildings, the office buildings. They had high exchange rate, but energy was cheap, and so they just provided and threw more energy at it. Building walls were largely uninsulated. They were either empty or solid cavities, which meant that there was a high latent heat potential, and that was able to readily dry the walls very easily. But obviously not comfortable or energy efficient. And that less toxic building materials were pretty prevalent, including the furnishing. So wood and steel furniture back then was now replaced with the plastic and particle board materials that we now readily see. And so off-gassing of the formaldehydes and other VOCs wasn't common. It wasn't really a thing. So older buildings weren't also healthier. So summary, do buildings need to breathe? Short answer is no. Its saying is purely an excuse for carelessness. Air leaky buildings are a poor strategy to protect buildings and their occupants' health and comfort. If we want to maximize durability, then we shouldn't insulate, nor should we occupy the building, which is both unrealistic and pretty dumb. And remember that insulation slows heat flow, which reduces the drying potential. So higher performance buildings require higher performance detailing because we need better moisture management. Those buildings need higher moisture management. So the goal, controlled mechanical ventilation with the correct filtration. Using ERVs and HRVs, they save significant energy. Proper distribution and design of fresh air and exhaust. Airtight construction, which includes providing the correct vapor profiles, the correct vapor retarders. Poly vapor barriers are a complete vapor barrier, and they totally prevent drying in that one direction. So you install that, and you technically only have drying in the outward direction to the outside. So using the highest vapor permeability material acceptable to control vapor for your building assembly. And source control, including direct exhaust kitchen fans, and that the passive house and the high performance methodology has changed in that perspective. And finally, using low VOC materials and furnishings. And that is the conclusion. Why buildings don't need to breathe.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for all of that information you just shared there, Grant. I don't know if you heard, but after all the wildfires that has happened in the past little while, Canada has now the most air polluted cities in North America. Is there, like, how did that information hit you when you heard it, or if you just heard it here for the first time?
Yeah, I've heard that before. I haven't heard that it's the most, but it is pretty shocking, right? Because everyone thought that Canada is this nice northern country with landscapes of green trees and lakes. So yeah, it's not great to hear.